Hello, I'm Judith A. Yates, true crime author and criminologist. This is Best True Crime. Every episode, I take you on a journey to explore crime, forensics, and investigations. In this episode, we will be discussing cold cases that don't often make the national news when they were murdered or went missing. Many of the cold cases that make the news seem to feature a certain demographic. Well, today, I'm focusing on several cold cases in Canada and the United States where the victims were over 65. They could be your grandparents, your parents, your neighbor. They are family members, friends, veterans, teachers, homeless, displaced, retired, mentally ill, people who probably believed crime would never touch them. Please look at these faces as we travel through their stories and consider their circumstances. If you know anything, any information at all, I'm going to give you the numbers to call. And remember, you can remain anonymous. In 2004, from August 9 to August 15, Hurricane Charley was the first of 4 individual hurricanes to strike Florida. Charley is the strongest hurricane to hit southwest Florida in recorded history. Property damage from Charley in the United States was estimated to be $16 billion. There were 9 direct fatalities. DeSoto County saw extreme damage, with 95% of the downtown buildings damaged. The roof was blown off of the only town shelter, leaving over 3,000 evacuees inside unprotected from the assault. Hurricane Charley left many homeless families. Many of the displaced persons were over 65 years of age. FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency, provided entire communities with travel trailers and mobile homes. One of those displaced elderly in DeSoto County was lucky to survive the hurricane, only to be struck down in her temporary trailer. Miss Eileen Seymour was one of several hundred displaced Floridians living in a temporary trailer. Miss Seymour, a resident of DeSoto County, relocated to Lot 103, 1625 Northeast Fivers Street in DeSoto County, Florida. She was found dead on March 2, 2006. Miss Seymour had been murdered. Investigators believe that she had been attacked at the doorway. Information as to the death of Miss Seymour is being sought by DeSoto County Sheriff's Office. A reward is offered. Contact the Criminal Investigations Division of the DeSoto County Sheriff's Office. Their number is 863-993-4700, or Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers 1-800-780-TIPS. We're going to stay in DeSoto County in Florida for a moment and discuss the case of 72-year-old Marjorie or Kathy Randolph. She is also known as Kathleen Richards. She was last known to reside in DeSoto County in the summer of 2000. A woman named Evelyn Allen of 1509 Southeast Eucalyptus Avenue was a caregiver for Marjorie. Evelyn Allen passed away in October of 2000, and after her death, the location of Randolph has been undetermined. Miss Randolph suffered a stroke some years prior to 2000 and may have a difficult time communicating or differentiating reality. There's not a lot of coverage on the disappearance of Marjorie Randolph. We need your help. Anyone with information needs to contact the Criminal Investigations Division of the DeSoto County Sheriff's Office. Their number, 863-993-4700, or call Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers 1-800-780-TIPS. You can remain anonymous and be subject to a reward. Now we're moving up north to Ontario, Canada, for a case that has made the headlines but remains unsolved. Ontario police are asking for the public's help in a decades-long missing persons investigation. Between 1997 and 1999, 4 senior citizens, John Crofts, 70, John Simple, 89, Ralph Grant, 69, and Joan Lawrence, at 77, vanished and are presumed dead. The investigators told the public that these 4 people had significant health issues and did not have the ability to leave the properties on their own. In 2007, the Ontario police changed this missing case to a homicide investigation. In 1998, John, who was 70, John Semple, who was 89, Ralph at 69, and Joan Lawrence at 77 were drifters. They found a place together. They were homeless due to family feuds and mental illness, and they just needed a place to stay. They also had something else in common. They were all four connected to a family named Land. The Lands owned and administered what they call a Christian senior residence. There were 3 of them. Now, 2 of these places were located in Elmsdale. Cedar Pines Christian Community was ran by Catherine Land, and Fern Glen Manor was run by Catherine, Walter, and Paul. Then there was a 3rd house, a private residence, and it took in seniors, and the Lands let these seniors live in outbuildings. The Land's uncle, Ron Allen, lived in the house. Now, John Crofts and John Semple lived in one of these homes, and Joan resided in a shed on the property. Now, we'll talk about that in a moment, but first we need to take a closer look at this family because it is important in this case. David, Walter, Walter's wife, Paul, and Catherine were convicted for embezzling money from seniors who were residing at their retirement homes. They were depositing the old age security and pension checks into the Land's accounts. They also stole from residents who had died from natural causes and from the 3 men who were now missing. The Lands just never reported them missing. Before she was 25 years old, Catherine had served time in prison for possession, theft, and extortion. In 1996, Catherine was charged with defrauding a Christian school out of $30,000. This was a Christian school where she had volunteered as a treasurer. Walter had been imprisoned for several home invasions. In one of these invasions, he bound and robbed a 90-year-old woman. He told her she had nice breasts. Walter was convicted of breaking and entering, theft, and impersonating a police officer. Now, David has been charged with breaking and entering, but it is not related to Walter's case. According to police reports, Land family members would comb the homeless shelters and search the streets for potential residents of their adult care centers. This might be the way they met Joan Lawrence. Now, Joan Lawrence was known to be very quiet, very articulate, but unafraid to speak her mind if she felt the need to. Social services and police would investigate the Land property where Joan lived, and Adult Protection Services attempted to remove her from the Land property, but Joan refused. And here's why. Somewhere in her lifetime, Joan Lawrence began housing unwanted litters of kittens, which of course turned into dozens of cats. She spent what little pension she had on cat food, and she took care of them, calling them her children. Let's talk about Joan's background because we know more about her than the other Canadian missing seniors in this case. Joan hailed from Ottawa. She was a poet and a freelance writer. She wrote for the Ottawa Citizen newspaper in 1940 when her poem appeared in the paper. The 19-year-old Joan became disillusioned with her life, and she was fired at 26 for writing a book when she should have been working on the newspaper. In the 1970s, in Toronto, Joan cared for her aging parents until their death. And Joan was observed living in Huntsville in the 1980s. Her name appears on a local property deed in 1984, according to the media. Joan was always seen in just cast-off clothes. She could be seen hitchhiking even in the dead and the coldest of Canadian winters. She would offer drivers $20 for taking her places, and most of them just refused. Now, Joan lived in a shack until 1994 when it burned down. Forced to leave the cats, she bounced from shelter to shelter, but she would always go back to the woods to feed and visit the cats. Next, Joan Lawrence moved into the attic of Cedar Pines Christian Retirement Home. This home was one of the Land senior communities ran by Catherine, and she moved Joan into the attic. Joan lived there for 2 years, being charged $600 a month. In 1997, Joan argued the rent was way too high, and she moved on to another land property, this one owned by David, Walter, and Paul. Now, Ron Allen, the Land's uncle, also lived on this property, but he didn't live in the same conditions as the seniors they were taking care of. Initially, Joan was living in this 8 by 10 foot shed. The shed had no insulation, it had no water or running electricity. And this is where Joan Lawrence lived with dozens of cats until she disappeared. Joan would go into town occasionally and she would report how one of her landlords abused her cats, and she was very afraid of her landlords. Ron Allen had often driven Joan Lawrence to town, but they always stopped at the post office and the bank where she would cash her pension checks. In 1998, Joan had contacted an attorney claiming the land stole her $744 income tax check. The check was found cashed, but not with Joan's true signature, and charges were filed. Because of an investigation by Adult Services, the Lands moved Joan to live in this van. And then, Joan went missing in November 1998. Police investigated Joan Lawrence's disappearance after she failed to meet her lawyer regarding the charges against the Lands. Law enforcement discovered 6 of her cats had been shot dead. Eventually, Ron Allen would confess to killing them. Ralph Grant became one of the Lands' residents around the winter of 1998. Ralph reportedly couldn't wash or feed himself. His speech was poor due to surgery on his jaw. John Semple went missing 1998. He had been living at Fern Glen Manor, another land property. John Cross was another homeless person, drifting here and there in Toronto. He was mentally ill and lived from shelter to rooming house. John suffered from bipolar disorder. Somehow his path crossed with the Lands in 1977, and he also wound up in Fern Glen Manor in Huntsville, Ontario. And then he went missing between January and March of 1998. 2001, the police department officially listed John Crofts as a missing person. Currently, John Crofts, John Semple, Ralph Grant, and Joan Lawrence are considered deceased, and police are actively pursuing their cases. How did they get away with it? Well, the Retirement Homes Act came into effect in Ontario in 2010, which means the Lands never screened and their businesses were never investigated. And today, the Lands have moved away from Canada and thus far have not been charged with any crimes relating to the case. They work as college professors, a plumber, and some of them, well, their whereabouts are unknown. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Director of the Ontario Provincial Police Criminal Investigation Branch at 1-888-310-1122, or you can call 705-329-6111. For anonymous calls, call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. And if you're outside of Canada, 1-705-330-4144. And their email is shown here. Please help us find out what happened to these people. Before we go on, I'd like to talk to you about true crime books. You can purchase any of my true crime books, even signed copies, at my website, truecrimebook.net. This includes the book Bullied to Death, a story of bullying, social media, and the suicide of Cherokee Harriman. Any of my books signed are available at www.truecrimebook.net. Now, let's get back to our story. And now we head to Chicago, Illinois to discuss the unsolved murder of a married couple, Aldonia and Lewis White. Aldonia and Lewis were both 90 years old, and they lived on the second floor of a West Side 2 flat located in the 4000 block of West Wilcox Street West in Garfield Park, Chicago. They were the kind of folks everyone knew, as they had resided there for 60 plus years and owned other properties in the area. Aldonia White was a retired nurse. She was adamant about kids leaving the street life for the student life, leaving the mean streets for a college building. Lewis White was a veteran. Lewis was known to have a great sense of humor, and he loved to sing. The couple had lost 2 children to cancer, and they kept photos of both children in a prominent space on their wall. The apartment had no smoke detector. In February 2018, Firefighters responded to a call at about 3:10 a.m. to an apartment in the 4000 block. It was ablaze. It took firefighters about 15 minutes to extinguish. Inside the home, they discovered 2 dead bodies. The badly burned body of Aldonia White was found seated at a kitchen table. The medical examiner would later list the cause of death to multiple blunt force injuries from an assault, with a contributing case listed as heart disease. Lewis White was found, barely alive, in another room, but he was dead on arrival at the hospital. He had inhaled products of combustion, and he also had a contributing cause of heart disease. Investigators soon ruled their deaths as homicide, as the fire had 2 points of origin, but we don't know who caused the deaths. The case remains unsolved. Someone murdered Aldonia and Lewis White. If you have any information, contact the Chicago Police Department. You can submit a tip online at chicagopolice.org. You can also text message TXT to TIP to the Chicago Police Department. And you can create a new text message or SMS text on your cell phone. Your identity will not be sent to the Chicago Police Department. You can email clearpath@chicagopolice.org, or you can call 312-746-6000. There is a reward. Another married couple's murder remains unsolved. Hopefully, you can help. The murders of Russell and Shirley Dermond in May 2014 occurred in Putnam County, Georgia, and it's made national headlines. Russell was a veteran and 88 years old. Shirley was 87. They had been married for over 60 years. They lived in a very large house on the lake in a gated community on Lake Oconee. There were cameras situated at the sole entrance and exit of this community. Russell was last seen alive on May 1st, 2014. He was running errands and was caught on video. He drove through a bank drive-thru and transferred money at about 2:15 p.m. and at 2:26 p.m. he was seen on video picking up a prescription for Shirley. He also picked up a few groceries, and then he walked out forever. The Dermonds were expected at a friend's 2014 Kentucky Derby party, but they never arrived. So on May 6th, a neighbor went to the Dermonds' house to check on them. The door was unlocked. Russell was found lying in the garage in a pool of blood. He had been decapitated. Gunshot residue on Russell's collar indicated he was decapitated after being shot, execution style, to keep ballistics from locating the bullet. And Shirley was missing. But nothing in the home was stolen. There were no signs of forced entry. There is no indication of a struggle. Nothing was out of place, and that includes jewelry and prescription medication. Shirley's phone and purse were still in the house. The video camera at the entrance to their gated community was not working, so no video is available of anyone entering or exiting this posh community. 10 days later, fishermen on Lake Oconee found Shirley floating face down. Her body had been weighted down with concrete blocks tied to her ankles. An autopsy revealed Shirley died from deep wounds to the head with a blunt object. The reward for information about the killings of Shirley and Russell Dermond has gone unclaimed. The Putnam County Sheriff believes that multiple people were involved in this crime. It's possible the perpetrators selected the Dermonds' home intending to rob them or extort them, but investigators cannot find anyone who had issues with the couple. If you have any information about the murders of Russell and Shirley Dermond, please contact the Putnam County Sheriff's Office at 706-485-8557. You can remain anonymous. In 1940, Joan Lawrence, who is believed dead but her body is missing in Canada, wrote for the Ottawa Citizen newspaper. This poem appeared in the paper. Parliament Hill. To see it first when evening stains the sky with shadows and the clouds that hurry by, are shifting backgrounds for its central spire, to hear the muted notes of liquid fire. Its silver throat spills upon the air, in haunting peals of melody that share the magic and the mystery of eve. and falling still, a nameless sorrow leave. To watch the night come down and cast a pall of candle-spangled darkness over all, weaving the city's lights into a maze, a chain of gold along the riverways. This is to see the veil torn apart that nations wear across their inner heart, to hide the burning visions that are there. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Best True Crime. I'm Judith A. Yates, and I hope you subscribe. Be sure to visit truecrimebook.net and be safe out there.